They said lightning split the sky the night he was born, Zeus himself announcing a child of thunder.
In the rugged north of Greece stood Pella, a cradle for warriors, not philosophers.
His mother, Olympias, filled him with whispers of divine blood and destiny.
His father, Philip of Macedon, forged unity from chaos and dreamed of conquering Persia.
The boy watched his father's victories and learned that power could shape the world. Then came Aristotle, the mind that would teach the conqueror to think before he struck.
He learned of logic, medicine, and distant lands, and believed the earth itself awaited him.
When others saw danger, he saw fear and mastered it.
At 12, he tamed the untamable, and the world began to whisper his name. Among hardened men, he fought like fire, small, fierce, unstoppable.
While others slept, he dreamed of Asia, vast, golden, waiting.
We must look east to Persia. The Hellenic League stands united under Macedon.
But ambition grew restless under Philip's shadow.
At a wedding feast, destiny struck. The king was dead.
At 20, the son of thunder became king.
The army that loved his father now vowed to follow the sun beyond the known world.
Before crossing sea, he crushed rebellion at home. Thebes resisted and vanished. The world learned mercy was not his weapon.
He declared vengeance on Persia, and Greece finally stood behind one banner.
Hundreds of ships, thousands of men, an army born for legend.
He left home knowing he might never return, and smiled at fate.
In 334 BC, he crossed into Asia, with 40,000 men and one impossible dream.
At Troy, he saluted Achilles and vowed to outshine him. At the border of Europe and Asia, he stared across the sea and saw destiny waiting. When his boots touched Asia, he claimed it not as land, but as legend. Across the river, Persian satraps prepared to drown the young invader.
At the Granicus, he charged first, defying death, defying fear.
By nightfall, Asia's gate was open, and the world had a new master of war.
City after city bowed, some by fear, others by fascination.
He called himself liberator of Greeks and conqueror of kings.
Each mile eastward pulled him deeper into legend.
Wealth poured at his feet, but gold was never his hunger.
They come from the west, my lord. The boy king, he moves like a storm.
In Babylon,
Among his men, he was not distant, but divine in confidence.
through mountain passes, he moved like wind, silent, swift, unstoppable. An oracle said whoever untied this knot would rule the world. He didn't untie it, he cut it. Destiny, he believed, should never wait.
Every storm, every star, he saw as a message meant for him.
The mountains could not stop him. nor the fever that struck him down. Even at death's edge, he trusted courage more than medicine. He rose again, pale but unbroken, and the army's faith became unshakable. Ahead lay Darius and 100,000 men, the true test of a god's ambition. He rode into the storm smiling, because history only remembers the bold. On the shores of Issus, a storm gathered, not in the sky, but in destiny. Two worlds faced each other, Persia's empire and one man's dream.
He led from the front, because fear obeys courage. At Issus, thunder had formed, and it bore his name. The great king fled, his empire broke before his eyes.
Riches beyond measure, but his eyes searched for more than gold. He spared the family of his enemy and won hearts by mercy, not fear.
To the vanquished, he offered respect, and the world called him noble. Darius offered peace, lands, gold, even his daughter.
He refused. The world, he said, could not be divided in two. Southward he went, chasing an empire through sand and myth. Tyre refused to open its gates and sealed its fate.
For 7 months, land and sea trembled under his will.
When Tyre fell, even gods seemed silent. He gave thanks to heroes of old, seeing in them his own reflection. Desert, hunger, thirst, none could slow the man who chased eternity. At Gaza, defiance was met with ruin. He turned his eyes to Egypt, the land of gods and secrets.
Across the Nile, destiny whispered again.
Egypt awaited not a conqueror, but a pharaoh reborn. In Egypt's sands, he sought not conquest, but confirmation from the gods.
Memphis opened its gates, hailing him not invader, but deliverer.
In the temple of Ptah, the Greeks became pharaohs.
He founded Alexandria, his vision carved between sea and desert. A city for eternity, where Greek thought would meet the world.
To the west, he rode, seeking answers not from men, but from gods.
The oracle of Amun awaited, the voice of the divine. You are the son of Zeus, the oracle said, and he believed it. He returned reborn, half man, half myth.
Egypt bent not from fear, but from awe.
He dreamed of one world, Greek, Persian, and Egyptian as one.
The pharaoh turned east again, his eyes on the heart of Persia. Envoys bowed, but Darius prepared vengeance. Behind him marched the greatest army the world had seen. Egypt's priests blessed the warrior they called divine. Through storms and hunger, he chased an empire that refused to die. At Gaugamela, the world's fate waited on one heartbeat.
He spoke not of victory, but of immortality.
Every step forward was a step into legend.
Dawn over Gaugamela. 2 empires, 1 field, and the silence before history shatters.
Darius III stood tall, an empire's last hope behind wheels of iron and beasts of war.
Across the plain, he saw not fear, but opportunity, a pattern only he could see. He pulled his line to the right, inviting chaos, turning calculation into trap.
Then the world exploded in sound. Steel, dust, and destiny. Riding at the center of storm, he pierced the heart of Persia itself. When his wedge struck, order dissolved. The impossible became inevitable.
Again, the great king fled, leaving an empire bleeding behind him.
Alexander chased shadows, but even victory can outrun the living. The price of it is silence, the kind that follows thunder.
He entered Babylon as conqueror and sat on Persia's throne.
Persepolis burned, not by anger, but as funeral pyre of an empire.
Among laughter and smoke, even gods could smell regret.
With Persia fallen, he marched deeper, because victory was never enough.
Even friends became threats. Power demanded suspicion.
He buried his enemies with honor, and his innocence with them.
East and West now spoke one name, Alexander. He began to believe the whispers, that he was more than man.
But every god who walks the earth must face his limits, and soon he would find them. He now ruled from the Aegean to the Indus, a mortal sitting where gods once dreamed.
In Babylon, his empire pulsed like a living creature, breathing conquest, craving more.
He found the great king murdered, not by him, but by fear itself. He wore Persian silk, and Greeks began to see a stranger wearing their hero's face.
He dreamed of union, of bloodlines and beliefs forged into one.
But greatness is a crown lined with solitude. The mountains tested what ambition could endure.
In distant Bactria, he met Roxana, beauty wrapped in rebellion.
Their union was political to some, poetic to him. He pushed east, where maps ended and myth began. For the Greeks, this was the edge of creation itself.
Each victory now came slower, heavier, like gods testing his resolve.
Exhausted and far from home, his men dared to say no.
He wept, not for power, but because the dream had reached its edge. He turned back, haunted by victories too many to count, and peace he could not find.
The desert devoured what glory left untouched.
He shared their thirst, their hunger, and their belief in him.
When he returned, he carried neither treasure nor triumph, only time. He married nations in one ceremony, 10,000 couples under one dream.
But beneath the crown, he began to feel the weight of his own heartbeat.
Beyond Persia lay a land of myth, India, where gods still walked among men.
Every river here had a name older than his own empire.
He met faces that feared him, and faces that simply did not care who he was. Even his closest men began to wonder if they followed a man or a myth.
At the Hydaspes stood Porus, tall as legend, calm as stone. In the storm's roar, he crossed unseen, the river his ally. Then earth shook, not from thunder, but from tusks and steel. Pain, blood, and brilliance, his art of war became survival.
Two kings met, one for honor, one for eternity. He spared Porus, calling him brother, because greatness recognizes itself. His companion since youth fell. He built a city in his horse's name to give loyalty a kingdom.
They had reached the edge, the horizon he once saw in dreams.
At last, his army mutinied. Loyalty broken nigh distance, not doubt.
Home! For the first time, they saw him bleed and remembered he was mortal. The return began, not of victory, but of reckoning. He crossed deserts where even memory dies. He still walked among them, king and comrade both.
They returned not as victors, but as ghosts who'd seen the horizon. The further he conquered, the less of himself remained.
He carried the marks of every battle, but none bled deeper than ambition itself. In Gedrosia, thousands fell, not to enemies, but to the sun. He refused to drink alone, turning thirst into devotion.
They walked in silence, an army reduced to memories.
When he returned, his victories weighed heavier than his crown.
He tried to weld nations together, but hearts obey no empire.
When Hephaestion died, the conqueror learned what conquest could not protect.
He built a funeral fit for gods and burned half of himself in it.
He began to curse the gods who had once crowned him.
To be called divine is to die alone.
His men wanted Greece, he wanted eternity.
In Babylon, the rain carried whispers of a god growing tired.
He wrote letters to friends long dead and sealed them anyway.
From Egypt to India, his empire began to breathe in fragments. He dreamed of new worlds, but time had other plans. He feasted among thousands and felt utterly alone. Then, one night, the god stumbled.
Fever came, quiet, patient, final.
Outside, the greatest army on Earth waited for a voice that would never speak again. And for the first time, the world had no master. The sun set over Babylon, and with it, the light of a man who thought himself divine. The fever came back, softly, like an assassin with no blade. Around his bed stood the men who would one day tear his empire apart.
He spoke of succession, but no one could hear the name. When asked who should rule after him, he simply said, "The strongest." And for 2 days, his army waited for a miracle, for a movement, for a myth.
When they passed before him, he raised his hand one last time. On June 10, 323 BC, the man who conquered the world lost his war against time.
Babylon wept, not for its king, but for its own reflection in his glory. The seat of empire stood empty, and power became a ghost.
In death, his empire cracked like glass, each shard cutting a piece of history. His body left Babylon, but his legend never did.
Some say his body vanished on the way, stolen by gods or men who feared him.
From death rose myth, immortal, untouchable, endless.
Every land he touched still whispers his name.
From Rome to Napoleon, every conqueror chased his shadow.
Immortality is a crown that even the sea cannot bury. His empire ended, but ambition never does.
20 cities still carry his name, and the dream he could not finish.
He was not content to rule the world. He wanted to understand it. And so he remains, part man, part myth, forever unforgotten.